A desperate woman stood at her neighbor's door in the pouring rain, asking for the impossible. "I want you to give me a child." Caleb Hayes, a 32-year-old single father trying to protect his young son from more pain, never imagined he'd face such an insane request. But the desperation in Elena Brooks's eyes changed everything. A strange agreement, a life rebuilt from ruins, and a family born from extraordinary courage. Follow my story to the end. Hit like and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story has traveled. The rain came down in sheets that Thursday night, hammering against the windows of Caleb Hayes' small two-bedroom house like it had a vendetta. He stood at the kitchen sink, scrubbing at a pot that didn't really need scrubbing anymore, just going through the motions because it gave his hands something to do. Upstairs, Noah was asleep, hopefully. The kid had been having nightmares again lately, waking up crying for his mother, even though it had been 3 years since the accident. 3 years, 2 months, and 16 days. Not that Caleb was counting. He set the pot in the drying rack and glanced at the clock. 9:47. Too early to sleep, too late to start anything productive. This was his least favorite time of day, the gap between Noah's bedtime and his own, when the house got too quiet and his thoughts got too loud. The knock at the door made him jump. Caleb frowned, drying his hands on a dish towel as he moved through the living room. Nobody came by at this hour. His parents lived 2 states away, and his friends, what few he had left after withdrawing from pretty much everyone, knew better than to drop by unannounced. When he opened the door, Elena Brooks was standing on his porch, soaked through to the bone. They'd been neighbors for about 8 months, ever since she'd moved into the rental house next door. Caleb knew her mostly through awkward waves across their driveways and the occasional small talk about trash pickup schedules. She was quiet, kept to herself, drove a sensible Honda Civic, and sometimes sat on her back porch with a glass of wine and a book. He'd noticed her in the vague, distant way he noticed most things these days, like she existed in the same world as him but on a completely different frequency. Now she was standing in front of him, shivering, her dark hair plastered to her face, mascara streaking down her cheeks. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice barely audible over the rain. "I know it's late. I didn't know where else to go." Caleb's protective instincts kicked in before his brain caught up. "Are you okay? Did something happen?" She opened her mouth, closed it, then shook her head. Not a no exactly. More like she didn't know how to answer. "Come inside," he said, stepping back. "You're freezing." Elena hesitated for just a second, then crossed the threshold. Water dripped from her clothes onto his hardwood floor, forming a small puddle, but Caleb didn't care. He grabbed the blanket from the back of the couch, Noah's favorite dinosaur one, and draped it around her shoulders. "Sit," he said, gesturing to the couch. "I'll make coffee, or tea. Do you want tea?" "Coffee's fine." Her teeth were chattering. Caleb moved to the kitchen, filling the kettle even though his coffee maker was right there, because his hands needed something to do again. Through the open doorway, he could see Elena perched on the edge of his couch, the blanket pulled tight around her, staring at nothing. Something was very wrong. When he brought out 2 mugs a few minutes later, instant coffee, because he hadn't had the energy to run the actual machine, she took hers with both hands, like she was trying to absorb the warmth through the ceramic. Caleb sat in the armchair across from her, waiting. "I don't know how to say this," Elena finally said. "Just say it." She looked up at him then, and the raw desperation in her eyes hit him like a physical blow. "I want to have a baby." Caleb blinked. "Okay." "But I can't. Not on my own. Not the way I want to." He had no idea where this was going, but a strange sense of dread was starting to build in his chest. "Elena, I'm not sure I understand what I want you to be the father." The words hung in the air between them, impossible and absurd. Caleb stared at her. "I'm sorry, what?" "I know how it sounds," she said quickly, the words tumbling out now like she'd been holding them in for too long. "I know it's insane, but I've been thinking about this for months, and I can't get it out of my head. I'm 34 years old. I was married for 6 years, and we tried for most of that time to have a child. We did treatments, we saw specialists, we spent every penny we had, and nothing worked. And then my husband decided he was done. Not just with trying, with me." Her voice cracked on the last word. Caleb didn't know what to say, so he said nothing. He left me a year ago, Elena continued. Took half of everything and married someone else 6 months later. And I'm here, alone, and I still want what I wanted then. I want to be a mother. But I don't want to go through some anonymous donor process. I don't want to raise a child wondering who half of them is. I want someone I know, someone good, someone I can trust. Elena, you're a good father, she said, her eyes locked on his. I see you with Noah, the way you are with him, the way you put him first. I know what happened to your wife, and I'm so sorry. But you didn't fall apart. You kept going for him. That's the kind of father I want for my child. Caleb felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. You can't just... This isn't something you ask your neighbor. This is crazy. I know. She set the coffee mug down on the table, her hands shaking. But I'm asking anyway. Not for a relationship, not for money, not for anything except biology. I would handle everything. You could be as involved or as uninvolved as you wanted. I just need someone who isn't a stranger. Why me? Caleb asked, his voice coming out harsher than he intended. Why not someone you actually know? A friend, a family member, someone who... I don't have anyone else. The admission seemed to cost her. My parents are gone. My sister lives in Europe and we haven't spoken in years. My friends disappeared when my marriage fell apart. You're the only person I see every day who seems even remotely stable. Stable, Caleb repeated. Jesus, Elena, do you hear yourself? She flinched, but she didn't look away. I know what I'm asking is unfair. I know it's too much, but I'm desperate, Caleb, and I don't have any other options. Caleb stood up, running a hand through his hair. This was absurd. This whole conversation was absurd. A woman he barely knew had just shown up at his door and asked him to father her child like she was asking to borrow a cup of sugar. I can't do this, he said. I'm sorry, but no, I can't. Elena's face fell, but she nodded slowly. Okay. She stood up, folding the dinosaur blanket carefully and setting it on the couch. When she moved toward the door, Caleb should have felt relief. Instead, he felt something uncomfortably close to guilt. Elena, he said as her hand touched the doorknob. She turned back. Are you going to be okay? For a long moment, she didn't answer. Then she gave him a small, sad smile that didn't reach her eyes. I have to be. And then she was gone, disappearing back into the rain. Caleb stood in his living room for a long time after she left, staring at the closed door. Upstairs, he heard Noah stirring, a small whimper that meant another nightmare was starting. He took the stairs 2 at a time, pushing Elena's impossible request out of his mind as he slipped into his son's room. Noah was tangled in his sheets, his face scrunched up in distress. Hey, buddy, Caleb whispered, sitting on the edge of the bed. I'm here. Noah's eyes fluttered open, unfocused and wet with tears. Mom? No, buddy, it's Dad. The disappointment on his son's face was a knife to the chest, same as always. She's not coming back, is she? Noah asked, his voice so small it barely counted as sound. Caleb pulled him close, feeling the familiar weight of grief settle over both of them. No, she's not. But I'm here. I'm always here. Noah buried his face in Caleb's shoulder, and they stayed like that until the boy fell back asleep. When Caleb finally returned to his own room, he lay awake until dawn, Elena's words echoing in his head. I want you to be the father. It was impossible, irresponsible, completely out of the question, so why couldn't he stop thinking about it? The next 2 weeks passed in a fog of normalcy. Caleb went to work at the construction company where he managed equipment logistics, picked Noah up from school, made dinner, helped with homework, and tried very hard not to think about the conversation that had happened on his couch. He succeeded about half the time. He saw Elena once, pulling into her driveway as he was taking out the trash. She gave him a brief wave, her expression carefully neutral, and disappeared into her house before he could decide whether to wave back. It should have been the end of it. But on a Saturday morning, when Caleb was in the backyard trying to fix the latch on the fence gate, while Noah played with his trucks in the grass, he heard Elena's back door open. She stepped out onto her porch with a cup of coffee, saw him, and froze. For a second, neither of them moved. Then Noah looked up. Hi, Miss Elena. Elena's expression softened immediately. Hi, Noah. How are you? Good. Dad's fixing the gate because it's broken. He says he's not very good at fixing things, but he's trying anyway. Caleb shot his son a look. Thanks for that, buddy. Elena smiled, a real one this time. I think trying is the important part. She started to go back inside, but something made Caleb speak up. Elena, wait! She turned, her expression guarded. Caleb glanced at Noah, who was absorbed in his trucks again, then walked over to the fence that separated their yards. Elena came down from her porch, stopping a few feet away. I've been thinking, Caleb said quietly. You don't have to. Just let me talk for a second. He rubbed the back of his neck, searching for words that didn't exist. What you asked me was the most insane thing anyone's ever asked me, and my answer is still no. But I wanted to tell you that I get it, why you asked, and I don't think you're crazy. Elena's eyes glistened. Thank you. I hope you find what you're looking for, Caleb said. I really do. She nodded, blinking rapidly. I appreciate that. She turned to leave again, and this time Caleb let her go. He went back to the gate, picked up his screwdriver, and tried to focus on the simple, manageable problem in front of him. But later that night, after Noah was asleep, Caleb found himself standing at his bedroom window, looking out at Elena's house. The lights were still on downstairs. He wondered what she was doing, if she was okay, if she'd find someone else to ask, or if she'd given up entirely. He thought about his own life, the small, controlled world he'd built since Sarah died, the walls he'd put up to protect Noah and himself from more hurt, the way he'd stopped taking risks, stopped reaching for anything that might lead to more loss. Sarah would have hated what he'd become. The thought hit him out of nowhere, sharp and painful. She'd been the brave one, always pushing him to try new things, to say yes to opportunities, to live bigger than his fears. And after she died, he'd done the exact opposite. He'd built a fortress and called it safety. What kind of example are you setting for Noah? The question haunted him for days. He went through the motions at work, nodding at the right times during meetings, signing off on equipment orders, making sure the job sites had what they needed. But his mind was elsewhere. His coworkers noticed. His boss pulled him aside on Wednesday. You okay, Hayes? You seem distracted. I'm fine. Just some personal stuff. Everything all right with your kid? Noah's great. It's not that. His boss clapped him on the shoulder. Well, whatever it is, take care of it. You've been solid for us, but I can tell when someone's head isn't in the game. Caleb nodded, feeling the weight of yet another thing he was failing at. That night, he tried to talk to his mother on the phone, dancing around the actual issue. How's Noah doing? She asked. He's good. Really good, actually. And you? I'm okay. There was a pause. His mother had a sixth sense for his bullshit. Caleb, what's going on? Nothing, just thinking about some things. What kind of things? Life things. Future things. Are you seeing someone? The question caught him off guard. What? No. Why would you ask that? Because you sound like you're wrestling with something, and in my experience, that usually involves another person. She wasn't wrong, just not in the way she thought. It's complicated, Mom. Life usually is, but you know you can talk to me, right? I know, I'm just not ready yet. After he hung up, Caleb poured himself a glass of whiskey, something he rarely did, and sat on his back porch in the October cold. Across the yard, Elena's house was dark except for one upstairs window. He wondered if she was lying awake too, thinking about the same impossible situation. On a Wednesday evening, 3 weeks after Elena's initial visit, Caleb made his decision. He didn't overthink it this time. He just walked across the yard and knocked on her door before he could change his mind. She answered in yoga pants and an oversized sweater, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. When she saw him, surprise flickered across her face. Caleb? Can we talk? She stepped aside, letting him in. Her house was warm and tidy, decorated in soft neutrals with touches of green, plants on every available surface. It felt lived in but lonely, like a place waiting for more people to fill it. Do you want something to drink? Elena asked. No, I'm good. He shoved his hands in his pockets. I need to ask you some questions. Okay. If I said yes, and I'm not saying I am, what would this actually look like? Elena's breath caught. She sat down on the arm of her couch, like her legs might not hold her. I've thought about it a lot. I would want us to do it through a clinic, medical supervision, everything legal and documented. You wouldn't have any financial obligation unless you wanted to be involved. I'd handle all the costs, all the logistics. If you wanted to be part of the child's life, we'd figure that out together. If you didn't, I'd respect that. And Noah? What about him? He's 7 years old. He lost his mother. He's still having nightmares. How do I explain to him that I helped our neighbor have a baby? Elena's expression softened. I don't know. But I think you'd find a way. You're good at that. What if it doesn't work? Caleb asked. You said you tried for years with your ex. Then we tried, she said simply, and at least I'll know I didn't give up. Caleb paced to the window, looking out at the street. A couple walked by with their dog, laughing at something. Normal people living normal lives, unaware that inside this house, two people were negotiating something completely absurd. This is insane, he said. I know. People are going to think we're both crazy. Probably. He turned to face her. Why does this matter so much to you? Elena was quiet for a long moment, her eyes distant. When I was a kid, my mom used to tell me that everyone's born with something they're meant to do. She said for some people, it's art or music or building things. For her, it was teaching. She knew from the time she was 10 years old that she wanted to be a teacher, and she did it for 40 years. Elena's voice went soft. I've known since I was young that I was meant to be a mother. Not in some abstract, maybe someday way. I knew it like I knew my own name. And I spent so many years thinking it would just happen naturally, that life would unfold the way it was supposed to. But it didn't. She looked up at him, and there was something raw and honest in her face that made Caleb's chest tight. I'm running out of time, Caleb. My doctor told me I've got maybe 2 or 3 good years left where this is even possible, and I can't let this slip away without trying everything, even if it's unconventional, even if it's scary. Caleb understood that feeling more than he wanted to admit. The desperation to hold on to something before it disappeared forever. He'd felt it in the hospital room when Sarah was dying, begging the doctors to do something, anything, even though they all knew it was already too late. I need time to think about this, he said. Elena nodded. Of course. And if I decide to do it, there have to be rules, boundaries, everything in writing. Yes, absolutely. And Noah comes first, always. I wouldn't want it any other way. Caleb moved toward the door, then stopped. Can I ask you something? Anything. Are you doing this because you want a child, or because you want to prove something to your ex-husband? The question clearly caught her off guard. She considered it carefully before answering. Maybe a little of both at first, but that's not why I'm asking you. I'm asking you because when I think about who I want to raise a child with, even at a distance, you're the only person who makes sense. You're kind, you're steady, you show up, and I trust you. It was the most honest thing anyone had said to him in a long time. I'll let you know, Caleb said. He went home and stood in Noah's doorway for a long time, watching his son sleep. The kid was sprawled across his bed, one arm thrown over his head, completely at peace in a way that made Caleb's heart ache. This was what he was protecting, this innocence, this safety. But was he protecting it, or was he suffocating it? Caleb went downstairs, pulled out a legal pad, and started making a list of every reason this was a terrible idea. Noah might not understand. It could get legally complicated. What if Elena changes her mind about boundaries? What if I get attached to the child? What if it damages our neighbor relationship? What if people judge us? What if it affects Noah's stability? He filled 2 pages. Then he flipped to a new page and wrote down the reasons it might not be terrible. Elena deserves a chance at motherhood. I have the ability to help someone. Noah could learn about compassion and helping others. Maybe it's time to stop living in fear. Sarah would have wanted me to help. That list was much shorter, but somehow it felt heavier. Caleb stared at both lists for a long time. Then he picked up his phone and texted his mother. Can you and Dad take Noah for the weekend? I need to handle some things. Her response came quickly. Of course. Everything okay? Yeah. Just need to think. We'll pick him up Friday after school. Caleb set the phone down and looked at the 2 lists again. He knew what he was going to do. He'd probably known since the moment Elena asked. He was just scared to admit it. Friday came faster than Caleb expected. He packed Noah's overnight bag, triple-checking that he had everything: pajamas, toothbrush, the stuffed elephant he couldn't sleep without, extra clothes in case he spilled something. "Why are we going to Grandma and Grandpa's?" Noah asked as Caleb loaded the bag into the car. "Because I have some grown-up stuff to take care of this weekend." "What kind of grown-up stuff?" "Boring paperwork things. You'd hate it." Noah seemed satisfied with that answer. The drive to his parents' house was 2 hours of Noah chattering about school, his friend Marcus who could burp the alphabet, and whether dinosaurs would have made good pets. "Probably not," Caleb said. "They'd eat too much and destroy the furniture." "But they'd be cool." "Yeah, they'd be cool." When they pulled into his parents' driveway, Noah was already unbuckling his seatbelt, excited to see his grandparents. Caleb's mother came out to greet them, pulling Noah into a hug. "There's my favorite grandson." "I'm your only grandson, Grandma." "That's what makes you my favorite." Caleb's father appeared in the doorway, waving. "Hey, buddy, want to help me build that birdhouse we talked about?" "Yes!" Noah grabbed his bag and ran inside without a backward glance. Caleb's mother turned to him, her expression shifting from playful to concerned. "You sure you're okay?" "I'm fine, Mom." She studied him the way only mothers could, seeing straight through the lie. "You don't look fine. You look like you're carrying something heavy." "I'll tell you about it soon. I just need to figure some things out first." She squeezed his arm. "We're here when you're ready. And don't worry about Noah. We'll spoil him appropriately. Not too appropriately. No promises." Caleb hugged her, then headed back to his car. The drive home felt longer, heavier. By the time he pulled into his driveway, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that Sarah would have loved. He sat in the car for a minute, gathering his courage. Then he got out and walked across the yard to Elena's house. She opened the door before he could knock. "I saw you pull in," she said. "I wasn't sure if you'd come over." "I'll do it," Caleb said, the words coming out in a rush. "But we do this right. Everything legal, everything documented. We both get lawyers. We put it all in writing." Elena's hand flew to her mouth. For a second he thought she might cry. "Are you sure?" "No," Caleb admitted. "But I don't think I'm supposed to be sure. I think I'm just supposed to do it anyway." She threw her arms around him without warning, and Caleb stiffened in surprise before awkwardly patting her back. She smelled like lavender and hope. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you so much." When she pulled away, her eyes were wet but bright, the first real hope he'd seen in them since that rainy night 3 weeks ago. "We should probably talk details," Caleb said. "Right, yes, come in." They sat at her kitchen table, a scarred wooden thing that looked like it had come from a yard sale, and for the next 3 hours they hammered out the logistics. Elena had clearly been preparing for this conversation for months, maybe longer. She had research printed out, articles about legal agreements between known donors and recipients, information about fertility clinics, success rates, costs. "I've already contacted a lawyer," she said. "She specializes in these kinds of arrangements. She can draw up a contract that protects both of us." "I want to be involved," Caleb said at one point. "Not like co-parenting, but I don't want to be a stranger to this kid. If we're doing this, I want them to know who I am." Relief flooded Elena's face. "I want that too. I think it's better for everyone. I don't want to lie to my child about where they came from. And Noah should know, not right away, but eventually. He's going to notice when you're pregnant. He's a smart kid." "How do you want to tell him?" Caleb rubbed his face. "I have no idea, but we'll figure it out." They talked about medical procedures, timelines, expenses. Elena insisted on covering everything, and Caleb insisted on contributing something, and they finally compromised on splitting the legal costs and Caleb handling any unexpected medical expenses that her insurance didn't cover. "I don't want you going into debt for this," Caleb said. "I've been saving for years. I'm okay." "Still," she smiled, "you're stubborn." "So are you." By the time Caleb left that night, the whole thing felt more real and more terrifying than ever. He walked back across the yard, climbed the steps to his porch, and paused with his hand on the doorknob. What the hell was he doing? But he'd made his choice, and for better or worse, he was going to see it through. The fertility clinic was in a medical building downtown, all white walls and uncomfortable chairs, and that particular smell that all medical facilities seem to have, antiseptic and faintly artificial. Caleb had never been in a place like this before. When Sarah got pregnant with Noah, it had happened the old-fashioned way, no doctors or procedures required. They'd been trying for about 3 months, and then one morning Sarah woke him up by throwing a positive pregnancy test at his head. Now he sat in a waiting room with Elena, surrounded by couples in various states of anxiety and hope, feeling like an imposter. Most of them were clearly together, holding hands, whispering to each other, presenting a united front against the uncertainty of fertility treatments. He and Elena sat a careful distance apart, not touching, barely looking at each other. "You okay?" Elena asked quietly. "Not really." She gave him a small smile. "Me neither." A nurse called Elena's name, and they both stood up. The woman looked between them with a practiced, neutral expression, not asking questions, not making assumptions. The next hour was a blur of consultations, paperwork, and medical jargon that went over Caleb's head. The doctor, a kind woman in her 50s named Dr. Patel, explained the process in detail, outlined the odds, and asked them both a series of questions that made Caleb's ears burn. "And you've discussed the emotional implications of this arrangement?" Dr. Patel asked, looking between them. "Yes," Elena said. "Thoroughly?" Dr. Patel pressed. "As much as we can," Caleb admitted. "Some things you can't really prepare for." Dr. Patel nodded, seeming to appreciate the honesty. "You're right about that, but I always recommend that known donors and recipients have very clear boundaries established from the beginning. Even with the best intentions, emotions can get complicated when a child is involved." "We're working with attorneys," Elena said. "Everything will be documented." "Good. I always recommend that." Dr. Patel looked between them again. "I have to ask, and please don't take this the wrong way, but have you both thought about what happens if this works? A child connects people in ways you can't always predict. Even with the clearest boundaries, feelings can shift." "We've discussed it," Caleb said, though he wasn't entirely sure they had. Not really, not beyond the practical logistics. Dr. Patel seemed to sense his uncertainty but didn't push. "All right then. Let's talk about the medical side." She walked them through the procedure, intrauterine insemination, she called it, explaining that it was less invasive and expensive than IVF, and given Elena's age and health, it had decent success rates. "We'll do hormone monitoring to track your cycle, doctor," Patel said to Elena. "When you're ovulating, we'll schedule the procedure. It's relatively quick and painless. Then we wait 2 weeks and test." "What are the actual odds?" Caleb asked. "For someone Elena's age with no major fertility issues, about 15 to 20% per cycle. If it doesn't work the first time, we keep trying. Most couples who succeed do so within 3 to 6 cycles." "And if it doesn't work after 6?" Elena asked, her voice small. "Then we reevaluate and discuss other options. But let's not get ahead of ourselves." The first attempt was scheduled for 3 weeks later, timed to Elena's cycle. They left the clinic with a folder full of information and instructions, and Caleb felt like he'd just signed up for something far bigger than he'd anticipated. In the parking lot, Elena turned to him. "Thank you for coming with me." "Where else would I be?" "I don't know, but you showed up. That means something." They stood there for a moment, two people about to do something extraordinary and terrifying, neither quite sure what to say next. "I should get back," Caleb finally said. "I need to pick up Noah." "Right, of course." He started toward his car, then turned back. "Elena?" "Yeah?" "We're going to be okay, whatever happens." She smiled, and for the first time since this whole thing started, it looked like she might actually believe it. In the meantime, life continued in its normal rhythm. Caleb went to work, picked up Noah from school, made dinners that were decent but never great, and helped with homework that was getting progressively harder. "Dad, what's a metaphor?" Noah asked one night, staring at his English worksheet. "It's when you describe something by comparing it to something else, like, time is money." "That doesn't make sense. Time isn't money. They're different things." "That's why it's a metaphor, buddy. It means time is valuable, like money is valuable." Noah frowned at his paper. "English is weird." "Yeah, it really is." Caleb helped him finish the worksheet, then sent him upstairs to brush his teeth. While Noah got ready for bed, Caleb stood at the kitchen window looking out at Elena's house. The lights were on in her living room. He wondered what she was doing, if she was nervous about the procedure, if she was second-guessing her choice to ask him. "Dad?" Noah called from upstairs. "Yeah, buddy. Can you read with me?" Caleb climbed the stairs and settled onto Noah's bed, picking up the book they'd been working through, some fantasy series about kids who discovered they had magic powers. Noah snuggled against his side, and Caleb read until the words started blurring together. "Dad? Are you happy?" The question caught Caleb off guard. "What do you mean? You seem sad sometimes, like you're thinking about Mom." Caleb's throat tightened. "I do think about Mom, but that doesn't mean I'm not happy. I've got you, don't I?" "Yeah, but you don't have anyone else." "I don't need anyone else." Noah was quiet for a moment. "Miss Elena doesn't have anyone either." "No, she doesn't." "Maybe you should be friends. Then you'd both have someone." Out of the mouths of children. "We are friends," Caleb said. "Kind of." "Good." Noah yawned. "I like her. She's nice." Caleb kissed the top of his head. "Yeah, she is. Now go to sleep." "Love you, Dad." "Love you too, buddy." Caleb turned off the light and headed back downstairs, Noah's words echoing in his head. Maybe you should be friends. As if it were that simple. As if friendship was all they were navigating. But maybe Noah was onto something. Maybe underneath all the medical procedures and legal documents, what they were really building was a friendship. A strange, unconventional one, but a friendship nonetheless. His phone buzzed, a text from Elena. "Can't sleep. Keep thinking about everything." Caleb stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back. "Me too. Want to talk? Can you come over? Or I can come there." Caleb glanced upstairs. Noah was asleep. He grabbed the baby monitor. Yes, he still used one, even though Noah was 7, and headed across the yard. Elena opened the door before he knocked. She looked exhausted, her hair messy, wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt with a faded logo he couldn't quite make out. "Sorry," she said. "I shouldn't have texted so late." "It's fine. I was awake anyway." They settled on her couch, the same positions they'd been in that first rainy night, except this time there was no storm, no crisis, just two people trying to process what they'd set in motion. "I keep thinking about all the ways this could go wrong," Elena admitted. "Like what? Like, what if it doesn't work and I've dragged you through all this for nothing? What if it does work and we can't figure out the co-parenting thing? What if your son ends up resenting me? What if—" "Hey," Caleb interrupted gently, "you can't control all of that. None of us can. We just have to deal with things as they come." "That's easy for you to say. You're not the one whose entire future is riding on this." "Maybe not, but I'm still in it, and I don't take that lightly." Elena looked at him, something vulnerable in her expression. "Why are you being so nice to me?" "Because you asked for help, and I said yes. That means something." They sat in silence for a while, the comfortable kind that didn't need filling. "Thank you," Elena finally said, "for doing this, for being here." "You've already thanked me like 100 times." "I know, but I'm going to keep doing it." Caleb smiled. "Fair enough." He stayed until Elena started yawning, then headed back home. As he crossed the dark yard, he realized something had shifted. They weren't strangers anymore. They weren't quite friends either, not in the traditional sense. They were something new, something he didn't have a name for yet. But whatever it was, it felt important. The first attempt happened on a gray Tuesday morning in early November. Caleb had taken the day off work, telling his boss he had a medical appointment, which wasn't technically a lie. He dropped Noah off at school, watched him run toward his classroom with his backpack bouncing, then drove to the clinic feeling like he was about to jump off a cliff. Elena was already in the waiting room when he arrived, her leg bouncing nervously, her hands wrapped around a paper cup of coffee she clearly hadn't touched. "Hey," Caleb said, sitting down beside her. "Hey." Her voice was tight. "I didn't think you'd come." "Why wouldn't I?" "I don't know. I guess part of me keeps expecting you to change your mind." "I'm not going to change my mind." She looked at him then, really looked at him, and something in her expression softened. "Okay." They didn't talk much after that. What was there to say? They'd already gone over everything a dozen times. The nurse called Elena's name, and Caleb stood up with her. "You don't have to come back," Elena said quickly. "I can do this part alone." "Do you want me to come?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, I do." So he followed her down the hallway, past exam rooms and medical equipment, feeling completely out of his depth. The procedure itself took less than 15 minutes. Caleb sat in a chair in the corner while Dr. Patel explained what she was doing, and Elena lay on the exam table with her eyes fixed on the ceiling tiles, her hands gripping the edges of the paper covering. "You're doing great," Dr. Patel said. "Almost done." When it was over, Elena had to lie still for another 20 minutes while Caleb sat there trying to think of something to say that wasn't completely awkward. "You okay?" he finally asked. "I think so. I don't know. This is weird, right? This whole thing is weird." "Yeah, it's pretty weird." Elena laughed, a short, nervous sound. "What are we doing, Caleb?" "Trying to help you have a baby." "No, I mean, what are we really doing? Because this feels like more than just a medical procedure." Caleb didn't have an answer for that. Because she was right. It did feel like more. But he didn't know what the more was. And he wasn't sure he was ready to find out. Dr. Patel came back in, gave Elena some final instructions, and told her she could leave. In the parking lot, Elena turned to Caleb before getting into her car. "Thank you for being here." "You keep thanking me." "I know, but I mean it every time." She paused. "Now we wait 2 weeks. And if it doesn't work, then we try again." Caleb nodded. "Okay." He watched her drive away, then sat in his own car for a long time before starting the engine. He felt strange, like he'd crossed some invisible line he couldn't uncross, like his life had just shifted in a direction he couldn't quite see yet. When he picked Noah up from school that afternoon, his son chattered about his day, something about a science experiment with vinegar and baking soda. And Caleb listened with half his attention, the other half still back at that clinic, wondering what the hell he'd just done. The 2 weeks that followed were the longest of Caleb's life. He tried to act normal, going through his daily routine, but every time he saw Elena, pulling into her driveway, checking her mail, sitting on her porch, he wondered if it had worked. If right now cells were dividing and multiplying inside her, if a life was beginning. Elena seemed to be handling it better than him, at least on the surface. She waved when she saw him, smiled at Noah, went about her business. But Caleb caught her sometimes, standing at her window late at night, staring out at nothing. On the 13th day, Caleb found himself pacing his kitchen at 11 at night, unable to sleep. Tomorrow was test day. Tomorrow, they'd know. His phone buzzed. "Elena, you awake?" "Yeah." "Me too. Can't stop thinking about tomorrow. Want to come over? Is that okay?" "Door's unlocked." 5 minutes later, Elena appeared in his kitchen, wearing a jacket over her pajamas, her hair in a messy braid. "Sorry," she said. "I know it's late." "It's fine. Want some tea?" "Sure." Caleb put the kettle on, and they sat at his kitchen table in the dim light, not really talking, just being present with the weight of what tomorrow might bring. "What if it's negative?" Elena finally asked. "Then we try again. That's what Dr. Patel said, right? Most people need multiple tries." "But what if it never works? What if I'm just broken?" "You're not broken, Elena." "How do you know?" "Because broken things don't fight this hard." She looked up at him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "I'm scared." "I know, me too." "What are you scared of?" Caleb thought about it. "That it won't work and I'll have to watch you hurt. That it will work and I won't know how to handle it. That I'm in way over my head and I'm going to screw this up somehow." "You won't screw it up." "You can't know that." "Yes, I can. Because you care enough to be scared. That's how I know." The kettle whistled and Caleb got up to make the tea. When he set the mug in front of Elena, their fingers brushed and neither of them pulled away immediately. "Whatever happens tomorrow," Elena said, "I want you to know that this, what you've done for me, it already means everything, even if it doesn't work." "It's going to work," Caleb said, surprised to find he actually believed it. Elena stayed until almost 1 in the morning, and when she finally left, Caleb stood at his window and watched the light in her bedroom click on. He wondered if she'd sleep at all tonight. He knew he wouldn't. The next morning felt surreal. Caleb got Noah ready for school on autopilot, made breakfast he didn't taste, and tried to act like it was just another Thursday. He'd taken another day off work, and his boss had stopped asking questions, which Caleb appreciated. After dropping Noah off, he drove straight to Elena's house. She answered the door still in her pajamas, holding a small white stick. "I couldn't wait," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was supposed to wait until I got to the clinic for the blood test, but I couldn't. I took 3 home tests." "And?" She held up the stick. 2 pink lines. Caleb's brain stuttered. "That means positive. They're all positive." For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Elena started crying. Not sad crying, but the kind of crying that came from a place so deep it had been waiting years to surface. Caleb stepped forward and pulled her into a hug, and she buried her face in his shoulder while her whole body shook. "It worked," she said between sobs. "Caleb, it worked." "Yeah," he said, his own voice rough. "Yeah, it did." They stood like that for a long time, on Elena's front porch in the November cold, holding each other while the magnitude of what had just happened settled over them. "We should still go to the clinic," Elena finally said, pulling back and wiping her eyes, "to confirm with the blood test." "Okay, I need a minute." "Me too." They drove separately to the clinic, and Dr. Patel confirmed what the home tests had shown. Elena was pregnant. Early, but definitely pregnant. "Congratulations," Dr. Patel said, smiling at both of them. "How are you feeling?" "Terrified," Elena admitted. "And happy and terrified." "That's normal. We'll schedule your first ultrasound for about 6 weeks. In the meantime, start taking prenatal vitamins if you haven't already, avoid alcohol and certain foods, and try not to stress too much." "Try not to stress," Elena repeated. "Right. Easy." Dr. Patel laughed. "I know it's not. But you're in good health, and there's no reason to think this won't progress normally. Just take it one day at a time." In the parking lot afterward, Elena turned to Caleb. "I need to tell someone. I feel like I'm going to explode if I don't tell someone." "Tell me again," Caleb said. "I'll act surprised." She laughed, and it was the most genuine sound he'd heard from her in months. "I'm pregnant, Caleb." "Holy shit." "Right? Holy shit." They stood there grinning at each other like idiots, and for the first time since this whole thing started, it felt real. Not just an idea or a plan or a medical procedure, but an actual human being who would exist in the world because of a choice they'd made together. "We should celebrate," Elena said. "Yeah? How?" "I have no idea. I wasn't expecting to get this far." Caleb thought about it. "Come over for dinner tonight. I'll make something special. We'll tell Noah together." Elena's expression shifted. "Are you sure? I thought we were going to wait." "I was, but he's going to figure it out eventually, and I'd rather tell him now than have him find out later and feel like we lied to him." "Okay, if you're sure." "I'm sure." That evening, Caleb made spaghetti and meatballs, Noah's favorite, and tried not to let his nerves show. Elena arrived at 6 with a bottle of sparkling cider, and Noah greeted her at the door with his usual enthusiasm. "Miss Elena, are you staying for dinner? If that's okay with you." "Yes, Dad made meatballs, and they're actually good tonight." "Thanks, buddy," Caleb said dryly. They ate dinner with Noah doing most of the talking, telling Elena about his day in excruciating detail. After the dishes were cleared, Caleb caught Elena's eye, and she nodded. "Hey, Noah," Caleb said. "Can you come sit down for a minute? Miss Elena and I want to talk to you about something." Noah's expression turned cautious. "Am I in trouble?" "No, nothing like that. Just come here." Noah climbed onto the couch between them, looking back and forth with wide eyes. Caleb took a breath. "Remember how we talked about Miss Elena wanting to have a baby?" "Yeah." "Well, I helped her, and now she's going to have one." Noah's face lit up. "Really? That's so cool. When?" "Not for a while," Elena said. "About 7 more months." "Is it a boy or a girl?" "We don't know yet. It's too early to tell." Noah thought about this, his brow furrowed in concentration. "So you're the dad?" he asked Caleb. "Biologically, yes. But Miss Elena is going to be the one raising the baby. It's a little complicated." "Are you going to live together?" "No," Caleb said. "Miss Elena will live in her house, and the baby will live with her." But we'll still see each other, right? Noah asked, looking at Elena with something like worry. Of course, Elena said. I'm your neighbor. I'm not going anywhere. And can I meet this baby when it's born? Absolutely, if that's okay with your dad. Noah turned to Caleb. Is it? Yeah, buddy, it is. Okay, good. Noah seemed satisfied with this. Can I go play now? Caleb laughed, relieved at how well that had gone. Yeah, go ahead. After Noah disappeared upstairs, Elena let out a long breath. That went better than I expected. He's a good kid. He really is. You've done an amazing job with him. I'm just trying not to screw him up too much. Elena smiled. I think you're doing better than you give yourself credit for. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, and Caleb found himself thinking about how normal this felt. Having Elena in his house, sharing a meal, talking about the future. When had that happened? When had she stopped being the desperate stranger at his door and become someone he actually looked forward to seeing? Over the next few weeks, a routine developed. Elena came over for dinner twice a week, sometimes more. Noah started treating her like part of the family, showing her his homework and his drawings, and the bugs he'd found in the backyard. Caleb caught himself watching them sometimes. Elena crouched down to Noah's level while he explained something with wild hand gestures and feeling something warm and unfamiliar in his chest. The first ultrasound happened in mid-December. Caleb went with her, sitting in that same corner chair while Dr. Patel moved the wand over Elena's belly and pointed out the tiny blob on the screen. There's the heartbeat, Dr. Patel said. Elena's hand shot out and grabbed Caleb's without warning, squeezing hard. On the screen, a rapid flickering pulsed in the center of what would eventually become a baby. Everything looks good, Dr. Patel said, right on track for a July due date. In the car afterward, Elena was quiet, staring at the ultrasound photos Dr. Patel had printed. You okay? Caleb asked. I just heard my baby's heartbeat. Yeah. This is real. This is actually happening. Yeah, it is. She looked at him. I keep waiting for something to go wrong. Elena, I know, but I can't help it. Every time something good happens to me, it gets taken away. My parents, my marriage, all those years of trying and failing. What if this is just another thing that gets taken away? Caleb pulled the car over into a parking lot and turned to face her. Listen to me. You can't live your life waiting for the other shoe to drop. Yeah, bad things happen. I know that better than anyone. But good things happen too. And you deserve this. You deserve to be happy without constantly looking over your shoulder. How do you do it? Elena asked. How do you keep going after losing Sarah? Honestly, I didn't for a while. I just went through the motions. But then I realized Noah was watching me, learning from me, and I couldn't let him see me give up. So I kept putting one foot in front of the other, even when it felt impossible. And eventually, it got a little easier. Does it ever stop hurting? No. But you get better at carrying it. Elena nodded slowly. I'm glad you're doing this with me. I don't think I could handle it alone. You're stronger than you think, but you don't have to be alone. She squeezed his hand again, and this time she didn't let go. Christmas approached faster than Caleb expected. His mother called to ask about their plans, and he found himself saying that Elena might join them, and his mother's silence on the other end of the line was deafening. Who's Elena? She finally asked. My neighbor, the one I've been helping with that project I mentioned. Is she the reason you've been so distracted lately? It's complicated, Mom. Caleb Matthew Hayes, what's going on? He sighed. Can we talk about this in person? I'll explain everything at Christmas. Should I be worried? No, I promise it's not bad. It's just unconventional. After he hung up, Caleb realized he'd just committed to telling his parents the truth. The thought made his stomach churn, but it had to happen eventually. They'd find out when Elena started really showing, and it was better to control the narrative than let them draw their own conclusions. He went over to Elena's house that evening to warn her. My parents are going to have questions when they meet you, he said. What kind of questions? All of them. My mom is relentless when she thinks I'm hiding something. Elena bit her lip. Do you want me not to come? No, I want you there. I'm just giving you fair warning that it might be awkward. I can handle awkward. Can you handle my mother asking if we're dating? Elena laughed. Are we dating? The question hung in the air between them. Not quite serious, but not quite a joke either. No, Caleb said. Right? Right, Elena agreed, but something in her voice made him look at her more closely. Unless, Caleb started, then stopped. Unless what? I don't know, this has gotten complicated, hasn't it? Yeah, Elena said softly. It has. They looked at each other for a long moment, and Caleb felt something shift in the air between them, something that had probably been building for weeks, but neither of them had been willing to acknowledge. We should probably talk about this, Caleb said. Do we have to right now? No, but eventually. Okay, eventually. But eventually kept getting pushed back because neither of them seemed quite ready to face whatever was happening between them. It was easier to keep things in the comfortable space they'd created, friends who were having a baby together, but definitely not in a relationship. Except it didn't feel like just friends anymore. It felt like something else entirely. Christmas Eve arrived cold and clear. Caleb, Noah, and Elena drove to his parents' house together, the back seat loaded with presents and Noah's overnight bag. The kid fell asleep 20 minutes into the drive, his head lolling against the window, and Caleb and Elena sat in the front seat in comfortable silence. Nervous? Caleb asked. Terrified. Are they going to hate me? They're not going to hate you, they're just going to ask a lot of questions. What if they think I took advantage of you? Caleb glanced at her. Did you? No, of course not. Then there's nothing to worry about. His parents' house was lit up like a beacon when they pulled into the driveway, every window glowing warm against the winter dark. His mother appeared at the door before Caleb even had the car in park, and he braced himself. Here we go, he muttered. Elena took a deep breath. Okay, I can do this. Noah woke up when Caleb opened his door, blinking sleepily. Are we at Grandma's? Yeah, buddy, come on. Caleb's mother swept Noah into a hug the moment he was within reach, then turned her attention to Elena. Her smile was polite but assessing, the way mothers looked at anyone who might be important to their children. You must be Elena. I'm Margaret. It's nice to meet you, Mrs. Hayes. Please, call me Margaret. Come in, come in. It's freezing out here. Caleb's father appeared in the hallway, shook Elena's hand with a friendly smile, and immediately engaged Noah in a conversation about the cookies they were going to decorate later. Caleb caught his mother's eye, and she gave him a look that clearly said, We're going to talk later. The evening passed in a blur of family traditions, decorating cookies, watching Noah open one present before bed, drinking hot chocolate that was too sweet but tasted like childhood. Elena fit in better than Caleb expected, laughing at his father's terrible jokes and helping Noah ice cookies with the precision of someone who actually cared about the outcome. After Noah was tucked into bed, his parents sat down on the couch with matching expressions of polite curiosity. So, Margaret said, Elena. Mom, I'm just making conversation, Caleb. No need to be defensive. She turned to Elena. How long have you two known each other? About a year. I moved in next door last January. And you're friends? Yes, Elena said. At the same time, Caleb said, It's complicated. Margaret's eyebrows went up. Complicated how? Caleb looked at Elena, who nodded slightly. We should probably just tell them. Tell us what? Caleb's father asked. Caleb took a breath. Elena's pregnant, and I'm the father. But we're not together. She wanted to have a baby, and I agreed to help her through a fertility clinic. Everything was done medically and legally. We have attorneys and contracts and everything documented. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush diamonds. Margaret stared at them. You're joking. I'm not joking. You got your neighbor pregnant on purpose? I helped her have a baby, yes. Caleb, what were you thinking? I was thinking that she asked me for help and I could provide it. That I have the ability to give someone something they desperately want, and it wasn't going to cost me anything except a little time and discomfort. This is insane, Margaret said, looking at Elena. No offense. None taken, Elena said quietly. I know how it sounds. Caleb's father spoke up for the first time. Are you in love with him? The question caught everyone off guard. Elena's eyes went wide. What? No, we're just friends. Then why ask him specifically? Because he's a good father. Because I trust him. Because I didn't want to use an anonymous donor and wonder forever who my child's father was. And you? Caleb's father turned to him. Why did you say yes? Caleb thought about all the reasons he'd written down on that legal pad months ago. But in the end, it came down to something simpler. Because she needed help, and I could help her. And because Sarah would have wanted me to. Margaret's expression softened at the mention of Sarah. She was quiet for a long moment, then sighed. You're both adults. I can't tell you what to do. But I worry about Noah in all this. Have you thought about how this is going to affect him? Every day, Caleb said. We've talked to him about it. He knows what's happening, and he's excited about it. He's 7. He doesn't understand the implications. Maybe not, but I'm not going to lie to him or hide this from him. That would be worse. Margaret looked at Elena, her expression gentler now. When are you due? July. And you're feeling okay? So far, yes. Just tired. That's normal. It gets worse before it gets better. Margaret stood up and moved to sit next to Elena. I'm not saying I understand this or approve of it, but you're clearly important to my son, and that means you're important to me. So if you need anything, advice, support, someone to complain to about pregnancy symptoms, you call me. Understood? Elena's eyes filled with tears. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. I give terrible advice. Caleb's father clapped him on the shoulder. You've always been good at jumping into things without thinking them through. Thanks, Dad. I didn't say it was a bad thing. Sometimes the best decisions are the ones you make with your gut instead of your head. That night, lying in his childhood bedroom with Noah asleep in the twin bed next to his, Caleb stared at the ceiling and thought about what his father had said. He'd made this decision with his gut, and so far, it had led him somewhere he never expected to be. Somewhere that felt right in a way he couldn't quite explain. Down the hall, Elena was in the guest room, probably lying awake too, thinking about the same things. This was complicated, messy, unconventional, but it was theirs. The next morning was Christmas, and Noah woke everyone up at 6, demanding to open presents. They gathered around the tree in pajamas, and Caleb watched Noah tear through his gifts with the unbridled enthusiasm of a 7-year-old. Elena sat on the floor next to Caleb, her hand resting on her still flat stomach, and he wondered if she was thinking about next Christmas when there would be a baby to hold. What are you thinking about? Elena asked quietly. Next year? Yeah, me too. His mother must have heard because she smiled at them over her coffee mug, and for the first time since he'd told her the truth, she looked almost happy about it. After presents, after breakfast, after Noah had fallen asleep on the couch, in a sugar coma, Elena found Caleb on the back porch. Thank you for bringing me, she said. Thanks for coming. I know it was awkward. Your parents are nice. Your mom is terrifying, but nice. Caleb laughed. Yeah, that's accurate. Elena was quiet for a moment. Caleb, can I ask you something? Sure. What are we doing? I mean, really doing, because this feels like more than just helping me have a baby. Caleb had been avoiding this question for weeks. Now, standing on his parents' porch on Christmas Day, he couldn't avoid it anymore. I don't know, he admitted. But you're right. It is more. Does that scare you? Yeah. Does it scare you? Terrified. They looked at each other, and Caleb saw his own confusion reflected in her eyes. They'd started this with clear boundaries, simple rules, a medical transaction. But somewhere along the way, those lines had blurred, and now they were standing in territory neither of them had mapped out. Maybe we don't have to figure it out right now, Caleb said. Maybe not, but we're going to have to eventually. I know. Elena reached out and took his hand, and they stood like that on the porch while snow started to fall, two people trying to navigate something they'd never planned for, hoping they wouldn't mess it up too badly along the way. The weeks following that Christmas conversation stretched into months, and the reality of Elena's pregnancy became impossible to ignore. By late winter, her belly had rounded enough that strangers asked when she was due, and Caleb found himself answering those questions alongside her more often than not. They fell into patterns without discussing them. Caleb started keeping a toothbrush at Elena's house. Elena had a drawer at his place for the nights she stayed over when the loneliness got too heavy. They grocery shopped together on Saturdays, Noah trailing behind them asking for snacks while Elena compared prices on prenatal vitamins. From the outside, they probably looked like any other expecting couple. But the reality was more complicated because they still hadn't defined what they actually were to each other. "Are we dating?" Elena asked one evening in March. They were assembling a changing table in the nursery, both of them surrounded by instruction manuals and inexplicably leftover screws. Caleb looked up from the piece he was holding. "I think so. We kiss. We sleep in the same bed. We're having a baby together. But we've never actually talked about it. Do we need to?" Elena sat back on her heels, one hand on her belly. "I don't know. Maybe? It's just weird to not have a label for what this is. Does it bother you?" "A little. People ask if you're my boyfriend, and I never know what to say." "What do you want to say?" She was quiet for a moment. "I want to say yes. But I'm scared that saying it out loud will make it real, and making it real means it can fall apart." Caleb set down his tools and moved to sit beside her. "Elena, it's already real. We're already doing this. Not calling it a relationship doesn't make it less scary. I know. But my ex-husband was my boyfriend, then my fiancé, then my husband, and look how that turned out. All those labels didn't protect me from getting hurt. Nothing protects you from getting hurt. That's not how life works. That's not comforting. I'm not trying to comfort you. I'm trying to be honest." Caleb took her hand. "I care about you. A lot. More than I planned to. And yeah, that's terrifying because caring about people means they can hurt you. But I'd rather be scared with you than safe without you." Elena's eyes filled with tears. Pregnancy hormones made her cry at everything these days, and she leaned her head on his shoulder. "Okay, then we're dating. Officially. Okay? Good. And if anyone asks, you're my boyfriend. And you're my girlfriend who's carrying my baby," which sounds insane when I say it out loud. Elena laughed through her tears. "It really does." The changing table took another 2 hours to finish, and they never did figure out what those extra screws were for, but Caleb decided it probably didn't matter. Nothing about their situation followed the instruction manual anyway. As Elena's pregnancy progressed, new challenges emerged. Her blood pressure started creeping up, concerning Dr. Patel enough that she ordered weekly monitoring. Elena developed heartburn so severe she slept sitting up most nights. Her ankles swelled to the point where she couldn't wear regular shoes anymore. Caleb watched her struggle and felt helpless. He couldn't take away the discomfort or the worry. All he could do was be present, rubbing her feet when they ached, making midnight runs to the store for whatever weird food combination she was craving, holding her when the fear got too heavy. "What if something's wrong with the baby?" Elena asked one night after a particularly rough day. They were lying in bed at his house. Her house had become too uncomfortable with all the stairs, and she couldn't get comfortable no matter which way she turned. Dr. Patel said everything looks normal. But what if it's not? What if we've come this far and something goes wrong at the end? Then we deal with it together. I don't think I could survive losing her, Caleb. I've wanted this for so long. If something happened... Stop. You can't think like that. You'll drive yourself crazy. I'm already crazy. Haven't you noticed? Caleb pulled her closer, mindful of the belly between them. You're not crazy. You're pregnant and scared, and those are two very normal things to be. But you can't spend the next 3 months catastrophizing every possible thing that could go wrong. Watch me. Despite his words, Caleb understood her fear. He'd felt the same thing when Sarah was pregnant with Noah, that terrible awareness that life was fragile and precious and could be taken away without warning. And after losing Sarah, that fear had only intensified. He knew too well how quickly everything could change, but he also knew that living in that fear meant missing the moments of joy in between. And there was joy, even in the chaos and discomfort of late pregnancy. Like the evening Noah felt the baby kick for the first time. Elena had been resting on the couch when Noah came home from school, and she'd grabbed his hand and pressed it against her stomach. Wait for it, she'd said. When the baby kicked, Noah's whole face lit up. I felt it. She kicked me. She's saying hello to her big brother. Does it hurt when she does that? Sometimes, but it's a good hurt. It means she's healthy and strong. Noah kept his hand there for another minute, waiting for more kicks, and Caleb watched the two of them with something warm expanding in his chest. This was his family, imperfect and unconventional, but his. Elena's baby shower happened in early April, organized by Caleb's mother despite Elena's protest that she didn't need one. Every baby deserves to be celebrated, Margaret had said firmly, and your family now, whether you like it or not. The shower was held at Margaret's house, filled with women Caleb barely knew. Elena's co-workers, his mother's friends, neighbors from both their streets. Caleb had planned to stay away, but Noah insisted they needed to be there. And somehow Caleb ended up in his parents' living room, eating tiny sandwiches and watching Elena open presents. She looked overwhelmed but happy, surrounded by people who were genuinely excited for her. For them. "You've got a good one there," Caleb's father said, appearing at his side with a plate of cookies. "Elena? Yeah, she's pretty great. I meant you. You stepped up when she needed someone, and you've stuck around when a lot of men would have run. That takes character. I'm not doing anything special, I'm just being a good man, which is rarer than you think." His father clapped him on the shoulder. "Your mother and I are proud of you, and I think Sarah would be too." The mention of Sarah caught Caleb off guard. His father rarely talked about her, respecting Caleb's grief by not bringing it up unless Caleb did first. "You think so?" "I know so. She always wanted you to be happy, and you look happy now, scared out of your mind, but happy." That's accurate. That night, after all the guests had left and the presents were loaded into Caleb's car, Elena sat in his parents' living room looking at everything they'd received. "I can't believe people gave us all this stuff," she said. "People like you. And they're excited about the baby. I keep waiting for someone to point out how weird this whole situation is. But everyone's just been nice. Maybe it's not as weird as we think. It's definitely weird. We're just lucky people are being polite about it." Caleb laughed and pulled her to her feet. "Come on, let's get you home before you fall asleep in my parents' chair." On the drive back, Elena was quiet, staring out the window at the passing streetlights. When they pulled into the driveway, she didn't immediately get out of the car. "What are we going to tell her?" she asked. "Who?" "The baby. When she's old enough to ask how we got together. What do we say?" Caleb thought about it. "We tell her the truth, that you needed help, and I said yes. And somewhere along the way we fell in love. You think she'll understand?" "Eventually. Kids are more resilient than we give them credit for." "What if she thinks it's weird that we weren't together when we decided to have her?" Then we explain that sometimes families happen in unexpected ways, and that doesn't make them any less real. Elena nodded slowly. "Okay, I can work with that." They sat in the car for another few minutes, neither of them in a hurry to move, both processing the reality that in just a few more months, they'd be parents together. Not co-parents or friendly exes, but actual partners raising a child. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. By May, Elena had entered what she called the miserable phase of pregnancy. Everything hurt. She couldn't sleep. She was exhausted but too uncomfortable to rest. And she was so done with being pregnant that she started asking Dr. Patel about induction at every appointment. "You're at 37 weeks, Dr. Patel said patiently. "We don't induce without medical necessity until at least 39 weeks. The baby needs those last few weeks." "But I'm so uncomfortable." "I know, but discomfort isn't a medical reason for induction. You're doing great, just hang in there a little longer." After the appointment, Elena cried in the car. Not sad crying, just frustrated, exhausted crying that came from being at the end of her rope. "I'm sorry," she said, wiping her eyes. "I know I'm being ridiculous." "You're not being ridiculous. You're 9 months pregnant. You're allowed to be miserable." "I'm just so tired of being tired, and I'm scared about the delivery, and I'm worried about what happens after. What if I'm a terrible mother? What if I can't handle it?" "You're going to be a great mother." "You can't know that." "Yes, I can, because you've already proved it. The way you talk to her, the way you've prepared for her, the way you've taken care of yourself throughout this pregnancy, even when it was hard. That's what good mothers do." Elena looked at him with red, puffy eyes. "How do you always know the right thing to say?" "I don't. I just say things and hope they land right." She laughed, a watery sound, and reached for his hand. "Thank you for putting up with me." "I'm not putting up with you. I'm choosing to be here. There's a difference." They drove home in comfortable silence, and Caleb thought about what his father had said at the baby shower, about stepping up and sticking around. It had never felt like a choice to him, more like an inevitability. Elena needed him, and he needed her, and together they were building something that neither of them could have built alone. The last few weeks before Emma's birth were a blur of final preparations. They installed the car seat and had it checked 3 times to make sure it was secure. They packed and repacked the hospital bag. They set up the bassinet next to the bed and stared at it, trying to imagine a tiny human sleeping there. Noah started getting nervous too, asking questions about what would happen when the baby came. "Are you going to forget about me?" he asked one night at dinner. Caleb set down his fork. "What? No. Why would you think that?" "Because you're going to have a new baby, and babies need a lot of attention. Buddy, listen to me. You are my son. Nothing is ever going to change that. Yeah, the baby is going to need attention, but that doesn't mean I love you any less or that you're any less important. Promise? Promise. You're stuck with me forever whether you like it or not." Noah seemed satisfied with that answer, but Caleb made a mental note to make sure he got one-on-one time with his son after the baby arrived. It would be easy to get consumed by newborn care and forget that his first child needed him too. Elena moved the last of her things into Caleb's house 2 weeks before her due date. It wasn't a formal decision, more like an acknowledgement of reality. She'd been staying there almost every night anyway, and it didn't make sense to maintain 2 households when the baby was about to arrive. "This is really happening," she said, looking at her clothes hanging in his closet next to his. "Having second thoughts?" "No, just processing. 6 months ago, we were still figuring out what we were to each other. Now we're living together and about to have a baby. We don't do anything halfway, do we?" "Apparently not." That night they lay in bed, their bed now, and Elena rested her head on Caleb's chest while he traced patterns on her arm. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Of the delivery?" "Of all of it. The delivery, being a mom, whether we can actually make this work long term. What if the reality of having a baby ruins what we have?" "It won't ruin it. It'll change it, but that's not the same thing." "How do you know?" "Because I've been through it before. When Noah was born, my relationship with Sarah changed completely. We went from being a couple to being parents, and yeah, it was hard. We fought more. We were exhausted all the time. We had to figure out a whole new dynamic. But it didn't ruin us. It just made us different. What if I'm not as strong as Sarah was?" Caleb shifted so he could look at her directly. "Stop comparing yourself to her. You're not Sarah, and this isn't that relationship. We're different people building a different family, and that's okay." "Do you still love her?" The question hung in the air between them. Caleb had been waiting for it, knowing eventually Elena would need to know where she stood in relation to his past. "Part of me will always love her," he said honestly. "She was my first love, and she gave me Noah. But loving her doesn't take anything away from what I feel for you. They're different kinds of love." "And what do you feel for me?" Caleb took a breath, knowing this was the moment to be completely honest. "I love you, Elena. I'm in love with you, and I think I have been for a while. I was just too scared to admit it." Elena's breath caught, and fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "I love you too. So much it terrifies me." They kissed, and Caleb felt something settle in his chest that had been unsettled for years. This was right. Complicated and messy and unconventional, but right. 3 days later, Elena woke him at 4 in the morning. Caleb, wake up." He bolted upright. "What's wrong? Is it the baby?" "I think I'm in labor. I've been having contractions for the past hour, and they're getting closer together." Adrenaline shot through Caleb's system. Okay. How far apart?" "About 7 minutes. We should call Dr. Patel." "I already did. She said to come in when they're 5 minutes apart or my water breaks." Caleb looked at the clock. 4:15 in the morning. "Do you want to try to sleep more, or should we just get ready?" "I'm not sleeping through this. I'm too nervous." They spent the next 2 hours timing contractions, Elena pacing the bedroom while Caleb watched the clock. At 6:30, her water broke, and suddenly everything became very real very fast. Caleb woke Noah, called his parents to come get him, and helped Elena to the car. She was calm, remarkably so, breathing through contractions with a focus that impressed him. "You doing okay?" he asked as they pulled out of the driveway. "I'm about to push a human out of my body. I'm absolutely not okay. But I'm doing it anyway." "That's the spirit. At the hospital, they were taken directly to a delivery room. Nurses hooked Elena up to monitors, checked her dilation, and confirmed that yes, this was really happening, Doctor. Patel arrived an hour later, assessed the situation, and told them it would probably be a while yet. First babies take their time, she said. Get comfortable. This could be a long day. She was right. The labor stretched on for hours, Elena's contractions getting stronger and closer together, but her dilation progressing slowly. Caleb stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand, helping her breathe through the pain, and feeling completely useless. I can't do this, Elena said around hour 8. It hurts too much. You can. You're doing it right now. No, I literally can't. I want to stop. Can I stop? Unfortunately, no, but you can get an epidural if you want. Elena considered it, then shook her head. No, I want to do this without drugs. I just needed to complain. Complain all you want. She did, extensively, and Caleb took it all without complaint. When she yelled at him that this was his fault, he agreed. When she said she was never having another baby, he nodded supportively. When she cried that she couldn't do it, he reminded her she was already doing it. Around hour 12, something shifted. The contractions changed, and Elena's whole body seemed to bear down with a new intensity. I need to push, she gasped. A nurse checked her and confirmed she was fully dilated. Okay, let's have a baby. Doctor. Patel was called back in, and suddenly the room was full of people and equipment and urgent instructions. Elena pushed with everything she had, her face red with effort, her hand crushing Caleb's. You're doing great, Dr. Patel encouraged. One more big push. Elena bore down again, and Caleb watched in awe as his daughter entered the world, tiny and perfect, and screaming her lungs out. The doctor placed Emma on Elena's chest, and Caleb felt tears streaming down his face. This was his daughter, his and Elena's, a life they'd created together against all odds. We did it, Elena whispered, touching Emma's tiny face. You did it. I just stood here. You did more than that. Caleb leaned down to kiss Elena's forehead, then gently touched Emma's hand. When the baby's fingers wrapped around his heart cracked open in the best possible way. This was his family, the one he'd never planned for, never expected, but desperately needed. And looking at Elena holding their daughter, both of them exhausted and crying and perfect, Caleb knew that every scary choice, every vulnerable moment, every risk they'd taken had been worth it. They'd built something beautiful out of an impossible request and a desperate hope. And it was only just beginning. The conversation on his parents' porch stayed with Caleb long after they drove home. It hung in the air between them during the quiet ride back, Noah asleep in the back seat again, the highway stretching dark ahead of them. Elena stared out the window, and Caleb gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary, both of them pretending the question she'd asked didn't change everything. By the time spring arrived, Elena was visibly pregnant. The small bump she'd been hiding under loose sweaters had grown into something undeniable, and with it came a shift in how people treated her. Strangers smiled at her in grocery stores. Her coworkers asked constant questions, and Caleb found himself feeling strangely protective in a way that went beyond their original agreement. He started doing things he hadn't planned on, shoveling her driveway when it snowed, fixing the leaky faucet in her kitchen when she mentioned it was dripping, bringing over groceries when she texted that she was too tired to go to the store. You don't have to do all this, Elena said one Saturday afternoon while Caleb assembled a crib in what would become the nursery. I know I don't have to. Then why are you? Caleb tightened a bolt, not looking at her. Because I want to. Elena sat on the floor, her back against the wall, one hand on her belly. She was 6 months along now, and the baby had started moving. She'd grabbed Caleb's hand one evening and pressed it against her stomach, and he'd felt the flutter of tiny kicks that made his chest go tight. Caleb, we need to talk about what happens after the baby is born. He set down the Allen wrench. Okay. I know we said you could be as involved or uninvolved as you wanted, but I need to know what that actually means. Are you going to be around every day, once a week, just on holidays? I need to be able to plan. What do you want it to mean? I asked you first. Caleb stood up, wiping his hands on his jeans. I want to be there. Not like a traditional father, but not like a stranger either. I want this kid to know who I am, to grow up seeing me as someone they can count on. And Noah? Noah already thinks of himself as a big brother. I'm not going to take that away from him. Elena's eyes went soft. You're a good man, Caleb Hayes. I'm really not. I'm just trying not to screw this up. That's what makes you good. The crib took another hour to finish, and by the time Caleb was done, his back was aching and Elena had fallen asleep sitting against the wall. He watched her for a moment, her face peaceful in a way it rarely was when she was awake, and felt something twist in his chest that he didn't want to name. He covered her with a blanket and let himself out quietly. That night, Noah asked a question over dinner that caught Caleb completely off guard. Dad, do you love Miss Elena? Caleb nearly choked on his water. What? Why would you ask that? Because you're always over there, and she's always over here, and you look at her the way Mom used to say you looked at her. Buddy, it's not like that. We're just friends. But you're having a baby together. Yes, but that doesn't mean... Caleb stopped, realizing he didn't know how to finish that sentence honestly. It's complicated. You always say that when you don't want to answer something? When did you get so smart? Noah grinned. I've always been smart. You just weren't paying attention. After Noah went to bed, Caleb sat on his back porch and stared at Elena's house. The nursery light was on. She was probably in there, folding tiny clothes or arranging stuffed animals, preparing for a life that was about to arrive and change everything. Did he love her? The question terrified him more than he wanted to admit, because loving someone meant risking loss again, and he'd barely survived losing Sarah. Loving someone meant opening himself up to pain, and he'd spent 3 years building walls specifically to avoid that pain. But the walls were already crumbling. They'd been crumbling for months, every time Elena smiled at him, every time she fell asleep on his couch, every time she grabbed his hand and pressed it against her belly to feel their daughter kick. Their daughter. When had he started thinking of the baby that way? Not Elena's baby. Not the baby he'd helped create. Their daughter. The shift had happened so gradually he couldn't pinpoint the moment, but it was undeniable now. This child was his in ways that went beyond biology, and that scared the hell out of him. In early May, Elena had a scare. Caleb was at work when his phone rang, her name flashing on the screen. What's wrong? He answered, because she never called during the day. I'm bleeding. Her voice was shaking. Not a lot, but enough that I'm scared. I called Dr. Patel and she said to come in right away. I'm on my way. Don't move. I'll be there in 10 minutes. He left work without explanation, drove 20 miles over the speed limit, and found Elena sitting on her couch with her keys in her hand, her face pale. It might be nothing, she said as he helped her to the car. Dr. Patel said sometimes it's just normal pregnancy stuff. But sometimes it's not. Don't say that. Please don't say that. Caleb drove to the hospital in silence, one hand on the wheel and the other gripping Elena's. Her palm was sweaty and cold, and he could feel her shaking. At the emergency room, they were taken back immediately. A different doctor, a young guy who looked barely old enough to drive, did an ultrasound while Caleb stood at Elena's side, both of them staring at the screen with held breath. The doctor moved the wand around, frowning slightly, and Caleb's heart dropped into his stomach. There, the doctor said finally, pointing at the screen. Good, strong heartbeat. Baby looks fine. Elena burst into tears. The bleeding is likely from a small placental separation, the doctor continued. Nothing major, but we want to monitor it. You'll need to take it easy for the next few weeks. No heavy lifting, no strenuous activity. If the bleeding gets worse or you have severe cramping, come back immediately. After they were released, Caleb drove Elena home and helped her inside. She was still shaking, the adrenaline crash hitting her hard. I thought I was losing her, Elena said, sitting on her couch. For those few minutes before he found the heartbeat, I thought it was over. Caleb sat next to her. But it's not. She's okay. This time. But what about next time? What if something happens during delivery? What if I'm not strong enough? Elena, stop. I can't. I keep thinking about all the ways this could go wrong. All the ways I could fail her before she's even born. Caleb took her face in his hands, forcing her to look at him. Listen to me. You are not going to fail her. You're the strongest person I know. You fought for years to have this baby. You're not going to give up now. How do you know? Because I know you. Elena leaned forward and pressed her forehead against his chest, and Caleb wrapped his arms around her, holding her while she cried. When she finally pulled back, her eyes were red but calmer. "Thank you for coming," she said. "I know I'm not supposed to need you like this." "Who says? Our agreement, the boundaries we set." "Screw the boundaries, Elena. You called because you were scared, and I came because I care about you. That's allowed." "Is it?" Caleb realized they were still inches apart, his hands still on her shoulders, her eyes searching his face for something he wasn't sure he knew how to give. "Yeah," he said quietly. "It is." For a moment he thought she might kiss him, or he might kiss her. The air between them felt charged with possibility, with all the things they'd been dancing around for months. But then Elena's phone rang, shattering the moment, and they pulled apart like teenagers caught doing something wrong. It was Dr. Patel, calling to check in and give more detailed instructions. Elena took the call in the kitchen, and Caleb stood in the living room, his heart racing, wondering what the hell had just almost happened. Over the next 2 weeks, Caleb made sure Elena followed doctor's orders. He brought meals, did her grocery shopping, and even took over some of her yard work despite her protests. Noah helped too, drawing pictures for the baby and insisting on reading to Elena's belly every time they visited. "The baby can hear me, right?" Noah asked one evening, his ear pressed against Elena's stomach. "The books say she can," Elena confirmed. "Good. Then I'm going to read her all my favorite stories so she knows who I am when she's born." "She's going to love that, Noah." Caleb watched them from the doorway, his son and the woman carrying his daughter, and felt something settle in his chest. This was his family. Not in the traditional sense, but in the way that mattered. These were his people, and he was tired of pretending otherwise. That night, after Noah was asleep, Caleb went back to Elena's house. She opened the door in her pajamas, looking tired but better than she had in days. "Is everything okay?" she asked. "We need to talk." "That sounds ominous. Can I come in?" Elena stepped aside, and Caleb walked into her living room, the same place this had all started months ago when she'd shown up at his door in the rain. "What's going on?" Elena asked, sitting on the couch. Caleb remained standing, needing the movement to organize his thoughts. "I've been thinking about what you asked me at Christmas, about what we're really doing." "Caleb, you don't have to—" "Yes, I do. Because I've been lying to both of us, and I can't keep doing it." He stopped pacing and looked at her. "This stopped being just about helping you have a baby months ago. Maybe it was never just about that. And I've been too scared to admit it, because admitting it means risking something I swore I'd never risk again." Elena's breath caught. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I care about you, more than I should, given our arrangement, more than I'm comfortable with, and I don't know what to do about it." "Do you want to know what I think?" "Tell me." Elena stood up, moving closer to him. "I think we've been pretending we could control this, that we could keep it neat and simple and bounded by legal contracts. But feelings don't work like that. And somewhere along the way, I stopped seeing you as the neighbor who helped me have a baby and started seeing you as the person I want to talk to at the end of every day, the person I trust more than anyone, the person who makes me feel safe." "Elena, I'm not asking you for anything, Caleb. I know you're still grieving Sarah. I know you've got Noah to think about. I'm just telling you the truth." They stood in the middle of her living room, the space between them feeling both infinite and impossibly small. "I'm scared," Caleb admitted, "of losing someone again, of not being enough, of screwing this up and hurting you and Noah and the baby. I'm scared too, but I'm more scared of pretending I don't feel this way." Caleb closed the distance between them, and when he kissed her, it felt like falling and flying at the same time. Elena's arms came up around his neck, and he pulled her closer, carefully, mindful of her belly between them. And for the first time in 3 years, something in his chest unlocked. When they finally pulled apart, Elena was crying. "Why are you crying?" Caleb asked, wiping her tears with his thumb. "Because I didn't think I'd ever feel this way about anyone again, and I definitely didn't think anyone would feel this way about me." "Well, surprise!" She laughed through her tears. "What do we do now?" "I have no idea. We're already having a baby together. Adding a relationship to that might be the least crazy thing we've done." "That's a low bar." "Yeah, it is." They sat on the couch, Elena curled against Caleb's side, his arm around her shoulders, both of them processing what had just shifted between them. "This doesn't change the baby situation, right?" Elena asked. I mean, you're still okay with the arrangements we made? Elena, I think we need to rethink the arrangements. She pulled back to look at him. What do you mean? I mean, I don't want to be the guy who shows up once a week and takes the kid to the park. If we're doing this, really doing this, then I want to be a real father, not just biologically, but in every way that matters. And if things don't work out between us, then we figure it out. But we do it as two people who care about each other and are committed to raising this child together, not as strangers bound by a contract. Elena was quiet for a long moment. My ex-husband used to say I wanted too much, that I was never satisfied with what I had. Your ex-husband was an idiot. Maybe, but what if he was right? What if I'm asking too much of you? Caleb turned to face her fully. You're not asking, I'm offering. There's a difference. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything in my life, which is terrifying, but there it is. Elena kissed him again, softer this time, and Caleb thought about all the ways his life had changed since that rainy night when she'd knocked on his door. How he'd gone from existing to living, from protecting himself to opening up, from just surviving to actually wanting a future. They stayed up talking until almost midnight, reimagining what their family could look like. It wasn't traditional, and it wouldn't be easy, but it was theirs. When Caleb finally went home, he found Noah sitting on the stairs in his pajamas. Why are you still up? Caleb asked. I heard you come in. Were you at Miss Elena's house? Yeah, buddy. Are you guys together now? Like boyfriend and girlfriend? Caleb sat down next to his son. Yeah, I think we are. How do you feel about that? Noah thought about it. Is she going to be my mom? The question caught Caleb off guard. I don't know. Would you want that? I already have a mom, but she's not here anymore. And Miss Elena is really nice, so maybe she could be like a second mom. Caleb's throat went tight. We can figure that out together, but right now let's just take it one day at a time, okay? Okay. Can I still call her Miss Elena? You can call her whatever feels right to you. Good. Because I'm not good at remembering to call people different names. Caleb laughed and pulled Noah into a hug. Come on. Let's get you back to bed. As he tucked Noah in for the second time that night, Caleb thought about Sarah. What she would think of all this. He liked to believe she'd be happy for him, that she'd want him to move forward, to find love again. But there was a part of him that felt guilty, like he was betraying her memory by opening his heart to someone else. Dad? Noah's sleepy voice broke into his thoughts. Yeah, buddy? I think Mom would like Miss Elena. Caleb's breath caught. What makes you say that? Because she's nice to you, and she makes you smile more. Mom always wanted you to smile more. Out of the mouths of children. Go to sleep, Noah. Love you, Dad. Love you too, buddy. The next few weeks were a strange adjustment. Caleb and Elena were officially together now, though they kept it quiet from most people, not ready for the inevitable questions and judgment. But being together meant navigating a whole new set of challenges. Like the first time Caleb stayed over at Elena's house. He'd fallen asleep on her couch after a movie, and when he woke up at 2 a.m, Elena was standing in the doorway in her nightgown, looking uncertain. You can stay, she said. If you want. In the guest room, I mean. Or, not the guest room. I don't know. This is weird, right? This is weird. Caleb stood up, stretching the kink out of his neck. It's a little weird, but we can be weird together. He ended up in the guest room that night, but within a week, that changed too. They moved slowly, carefully, two people who'd both been hurt learning to trust again. Elena's belly grew bigger, and with it came new worries. She developed gestational diabetes and had to monitor her blood sugar. Her feet swelled. She couldn't sleep comfortably, and through it all, Caleb was there, rubbing her feet, making her the weird food combinations she craved, holding her when she cried because her body didn't feel like her own anymore. I'm a mess, she said one night, lying in bed with her feet propped up on pillows. You're growing a human. That's allowed to be messy. I don't feel beautiful. I feel like a whale. Caleb kissed her forehead. You're the most beautiful whale I've ever seen. That's a terrible compliment. I know. I'm working on it. She laughed, and Caleb felt that now familiar warmth in his chest. This was what he'd been missing without knowing it. Not just romance, but partnership. Someone to share the daily minutiae of life with. Someone who saw him at his worst and stayed anyway. In late June, Elena's sister called from Europe. Caleb only heard one side of the conversation, but he could tell it wasn't going well. "No, I don't need you to fly out here," Elena said, her voice tight. "I have people helping me. Yes, I'm sure. Because you haven't spoken to me in 3 years, Catherine, and I don't need you showing up now because you feel guilty. I have to go." She hung up and threw her phone on the couch. "You okay?" Caleb asked. "My sister suddenly cares that I'm having a baby. Where was she when I was going through my divorce? Where was she when I was spending every penny I had on fertility treatments? But now that there's actually a baby coming, she wants to be involved. Maybe she's trying to make amends. Or maybe she's just nosy." Elena sighed. "But, sorry, I don't mean to take it out on you. You can take it out on me. That's what I'm here for." Elena looked at him, her eyes softening. "How did I get so lucky?" "I ask myself the same thing every day." "Liar. You think you're the lucky one." "I know I am." They'd gotten good at this, the easy back and forth that came with knowing someone deeply. But there were still moments when the reality of their situation hit Caleb hard, like when he realized he didn't know how to introduce Elena to people. Girlfriend felt too casual, partner felt too corporate. The mother of my child was technically accurate, but explained nothing. "What do I call you?" he asked one day. "What? When people ask who you are, what do I say?" Elena thought about it. "How about just Elena? I'm Elena. That seems like enough." "Okay, you're Elena. And you're Caleb, the man I'm crazy about, who also happens to be my baby's father." "That's a mouthful." "Yeah, but it's true." The baby's due date was July 15th, and as the date approached, Elena became increasingly anxious. She had her hospital bag packed and repacked a dozen times. She'd read every pregnancy book she could find. She'd taken a childbirth class where Caleb had been her partner, learning breathing techniques and labor positions and trying not to panic when the instructor showed them videos of actual births. "I'm not ready for this," Elena said one night in early July. "Nobody's ever ready. But what if I do it wrong? What if I can't handle the pain? What if something goes wrong? Then we deal with it, together. You're going to be there? In the delivery room? If you want me there. I want you there. I'm going to need you there." Caleb kissed her. "Then I'll be there." On July 10th, 5 days before her due date, Elena's water broke at 3 a.m. She called Caleb, and he could hear the panic in her voice. "It's happening. Oh my goodness, it's actually happening. I'm on my way. Call your doctor." Caleb woke Noah, called his parents to come get him, and was at Elena's house within 10 minutes. She was sitting on her couch in her pajamas, a puddle on the floor, looking terrified. "I'm not ready," she said. "Too late now." His parents arrived to take Noah, his mother giving Caleb a hug and whispering, "You've got this." And then Caleb and Elena were in the car, driving to the hospital in the pre-dawn dark. Elena's contractions started about 20 minutes after they arrived, and within an hour she was in active labor. Caleb had thought he knew what to expect from the childbirth class, but nothing prepared him for the reality of watching someone he loved in that much pain. "I can't do this," Elena said during a particularly bad contraction. "Yes, you can." "No, I really can't. I changed my mind. I don't want to do this anymore." Little late for that. She would have laughed if she wasn't in the middle of another contraction. Caleb held her hand, let her squeeze until his fingers went numb, and tried to remember everything the instructor had said about being a supportive partner. The labor lasted 14 hours. 14 hours of pain and fear and exhaustion, of nurses checking dilation and the doctor coming in periodically to assess progress. At one point, around hour 10, Elena looked at Caleb with tears streaming down her face. "I'm so tired." "I know, but you're almost there. Promise me this is worth it." "It's worth it. I promise." At 6:47 in the evening, Emma Rose Hayes came into the world screaming. The doctor placed her on Elena's chest, and everything else faded away. The pain, the exhaustion, the fear, all of it disappeared in the face of this tiny, perfect human they'd created. Caleb couldn't breathe. He'd been in the delivery room when Noah was born, had felt that same overwhelming rush of love and terror. But this was different. This was a child he'd chosen, a child he and Elena had fought for, a child born from an impossible request and an unlikely partnership. She's beautiful, Elena whispered, touching Emma's tiny face. She looks like you, Caleb said. She has your nose. Poor kid. Elena laughed through her tears, and Caleb leaned down to kiss her forehead, then gently touched Emma's hand. The baby's fingers wrapped around his, and something in his chest cracked open completely. This was his daughter, not just biologically, but in every way that mattered. After the nurses took Emma to clean her up and check her vitals, Elena reached for Caleb's hand. "We did it," she said. "You did it. I just held your hand. You did more than that. You gave me this. You gave me her." Caleb couldn't find words, so he just kissed her, pouring everything he felt into that single moment. When Emma was brought back, cleaned and swaddled, Caleb held his daughter for the first time. She was so small, so fragile, her eyes squeezed shut, her tiny mouth moving in sleep. He'd forgotten how impossibly small newborns were, how terrifying it was to be responsible for something so breakable. "What do you think?" Elena asked from the hospital bed. "I think we're in trouble." Good trouble or bad trouble? The best kind of trouble. They spent that first night in the hospital, taking turns holding Emma, learning to feed her, changing diapers, and marveling at the fact that they'd actually pulled this off. Against all odds, despite all the complications and fears, they'd created a family. In the morning, Caleb's parents brought Noah to meet his baby sister. The kid's eyes went wide when he saw Emma. "She's so tiny," he whispered. "You were that tiny once," Caleb said. "Really?" "Really." Noah reached out carefully to touch Emma's hand, and when her fingers wrapped around his whole face lit up. "She likes me." "Of course she likes you. You're her big brother." Elena watched them with tears in her eyes, and Caleb's mother put a hand on her shoulder. "You did good, honey," Margaret said quietly. "Thank you for everything. You're a family now. That's what family does." Later, after everyone had left and Emma was asleep in the hospital bassinet, Caleb and Elena sat together in the quiet. "I keep thinking about that night you showed up at my door," Caleb said. "When I asked you for something impossible? Yeah, if you'd told me then that we'd end up here, I would have thought you were insane. We are a little insane." "Maybe, but it worked." Elena leaned her head on his shoulder. "What happens now? Now we go home and figure out how to keep a tiny human alive. That's terrifying. Completely. But we'll figure it out together. Promise?" "Promise." They sat like that for a long time, watching their daughter sleep. Two people who'd taken the biggest risk of their lives and somehow ended up exactly where they needed to be. The first week home with Emma was chaos wrapped in exhaustion. Caleb had forgotten how little newborns slept, how their cries could pierce straight through your skull at 3 a.m, how nothing in your life prepared you for the sheer responsibility of keeping something so small alive. Elena moved through those early days like someone in a fog, her body still recovering from delivery, her hormones doing things that made her cry at commercials and snap at Caleb over nothing. He didn't take it personally. He'd seen Sarah go through the same thing with Noah, the way your brain chemistry went haywire after birth, turning everything into either a crisis or a reason to weep. They'd decided Elena and Emma would stay at Elena's house for now, but Caleb was there almost constantly. He'd taken 2 weeks off work, and he spent most of it shuttling between the two houses, trying to be present for both Emma and Noah, making sure Elena ate and slept, and generally feeling like he was failing at everything. "You need to go home and sleep," Elena said one night around 2 a.m. Emma had finally fallen asleep after an hour of screaming, and both of them looked like they'd been through a war. "I'm fine." "You're falling asleep standing up." "So are you." "Yeah, but I'm her mother. I don't have a choice." Caleb sat down heavily on the couch. "What if something happens and I'm not here?" "Then I handle it. Women have been having babies without men in the room for thousands of years." "That's not comforting." Elena sat next to him, her head dropping onto his shoulder. "I'm terrified too, you know. Every time she cries, I think something's wrong. Every time she sleeps too long, I check to make sure she's breathing. This is completely insane." "We're doing okay though, right?" "I have no idea. How do you tell if you're doing it right?" "If the baby's alive at the end of the day, you did it right." Elena laughed, a tired, ragged sound. "That's a low bar." It's the only bar that matters right now. Noah came over every day after school, still living with Caleb at their house, but desperate to spend time with his baby sister. He'd appointed himself Emma's official storyteller and entertainment committee, reading to her from his favorite books and showing her his toy trucks, even though she couldn't see more than a few inches in front of her face. "When is she going to be able to play?" Noah asked one afternoon, watching Emma sleep in her bassinet. "Not for a while, buddy. Babies don't do much except eat and sleep and cry." "That sounds boring." "It is boring, but it gets better." "How long until it gets better?" Caleb thought about it. "A few months, maybe longer." Noah looked disappointed but resigned. "Okay, I'll wait." The kid's patience with Emma was remarkable. He never complained when the baby cried during his favorite TV show, never got jealous when Caleb had to cut their time short to help Elena. If anything, he seemed proud to be a big brother, telling everyone at school about Emma until his teacher called to make sure everything was okay at home. "Noah talks about this baby constantly," she said. "I just wanted to check in and make sure he's adjusting well to the change." "He's adjusting great," Caleb assured her. "Better than the adults, honestly." 3 weeks after Emma was born, Caleb came home from Elena's house at midnight to find his mother sitting in his kitchen. "Mom, what are you doing here?" "You gave me a key, remember? I let myself in." Margaret stood up, crossing her arms. "We need to talk." "Can it wait?" "I'm exhausted." "No, it can't. Sit down." Caleb sat, too tired to argue. "You're running yourself into the ground," Margaret said. "I've been watching you for 3 weeks, and you're trying to be in 2 places at once, taking care of 2 households, and you're going to collapse if you keep this up." "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You look like you haven't slept in days. When was the last time you ate a real meal?" Caleb couldn't remember. "I'm handling it. You're drowning, and I get it, you want to be there for Elena and the baby, but you also have a son who needs you, and you can't take care of everyone if you don't take care of yourself." "What am I supposed to do? Leave Elena to handle a newborn alone?" "No, I'm suggesting you stop pretending you live in 2 separate houses and admit that you're already a family. Move in together. Officially. Stop this ridiculous back and forth that's wearing you down." Caleb rubbed his face. "It's too soon. We've only been together a few months." "You're having a child together. You're past too soon." "What if it doesn't work out? What if we move in together and realize we can't stand each other?" Margaret sat down across from him, her expression softening. "Honey, relationships are always a risk. Sarah wasn't a guarantee when you married her. I wasn't a guarantee when I married your father. But you can't build a life while keeping one foot out the door, waiting for everything to fall apart." "I'm scared, Mom." "I know you are. But you're also in love with that woman, and she's in love with you, and you've got 2 kids who need both of you. So stop being scared and start being brave." After his mother left, Caleb lay in bed staring at the ceiling. She was right, as usual. He was exhausted from trying to maintain 2 separate lives, from pretending he and Elena were just co-parenting when they were clearly so much more than that. But moving in together meant commitment. It meant admitting this was real, permanent, not just a temporary arrangement that could be dissolved if things got hard. The next morning, Caleb went over to Elena's house and found her sitting on the couch in her pajamas, Emma asleep on her chest, looking more tired than he'd ever seen her. "We need to talk," he said. Elena's eyes went wide with panic. "Oh no, that's never good. What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong, but this isn't working." "What do you mean? Are you breaking up with me? Because if you are, could you at least wait until I've had more than 3 hours of sleep?" "I'm not breaking up with you. I'm saying this arrangement isn't working. Me bouncing between 2 houses, trying to be everywhere at once. I'm exhausted. You're exhausted. And Noah's confused about where I actually live." "So what are you suggesting?" Caleb sat down next to her. "Move in with me. You and Emma. My house has more space, and it doesn't make sense to keep paying rent on this place when we're basically living together anyway." Elena stared at him. "Are you serious?" "Completely serious." "Caleb, that's a huge step." "I know, but we're already taking care of a newborn together. Living under the same roof isn't going to make things more complicated than they already are." "What about Noah? Have you asked him?" "Not yet, but I think he'd be thrilled. He's been asking when you and Emma are coming to our house anyway." Elena looked down at Emma, her expression uncertain. "What if we drive each other crazy?" Then we drive each other crazy. But at least we'll be doing it under the same roof instead of running ourselves ragged going back and forth. I need to think about it. Okay, take your time. Elena thought about it for exactly 2 days before showing up at Caleb's door with Emma in her car seat and a suitcase. I'm saying yes, she said. But on a trial basis. If this is a disaster, we're getting separate places again. Deal. They moved Elena's stuff over the course of a week. Caleb cleared out the office to make a nursery, and Noah insisted on helping paint the walls a soft yellow. Elena's furniture mixed with Caleb's in ways that sometimes worked and sometimes didn't, but slowly, the house started to feel like it belonged to all of them, instead of just Caleb and Noah. The first night they all slept under the same roof, Caleb lay in bed next to Elena, his bed, their bed now, and listened to Emma fussing in the nursery down the hall. Noah was asleep in his room. Elena was curled against his side, already drifting off despite the baby noises. This was his family. Imperfect, unconventional, born from an impossible request on a rainy night. But it was real, and it was his, and he wouldn't trade it for anything. Emma was 3 months old when Caleb's ex-boss called asking him to come back to work. He'd been on extended leave, burning through his savings, and he knew he needed to get back eventually. But the thought of leaving Elena alone with a baby all day made his chest tight. You have to go back, Elena said when he brought it up. We can't live on savings forever. But what about you? You can't handle Emma by yourself all day. Women do it all the time. That doesn't mean you should have to, Elena smiled. I'll be fine, and your mom already offered to come by a few days a week to help. She did? Yeah. She called yesterday and basically invited herself over. I think she's decided to adopt me. That sounds like her. Caleb went back to work the following Monday, and it was harder than he expected. He spent the entire day checking his phone, texting Elena every hour to make sure everything was okay. When he got home, he found her on the couch with Emma, both of them asleep, and his heart did something complicated in his chest. He'd been so focused on not losing people that he'd forgotten what it felt like to have them. To come home to a house full of voices and chaos and love. To have someone waiting for him, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. As Emma grew, the house got louder and messier and fuller. She started smiling at around 6 weeks, which made all the sleepless nights feel worth it. She learned to hold her head up, then to roll over, then to sit up with support. Each milestone felt like a small miracle, proof that they were doing something right. Noah remained the devoted big brother, though he sometimes got frustrated when Emma grabbed his toys or drooled on his homework. But Caleb would catch him talking to her when he thought no one was listening, telling her about his day, promising to teach her all the important stuff when she got bigger. What kind of important stuff? Caleb asked one evening, after overhearing one of these conversations. Like how to ride a bike and catch frogs and not let people be mean to you at school. Those are good things to teach. I know I'm going to be a really good big brother. You already are, buddy. Around Emma's first birthday, Elena brought up the subject of marriage. They were sitting on the back porch after both kids were in bed, sharing a beer and enjoying the rare quiet. Do you ever think about getting married? She asked. Caleb had been thinking about it for months but hadn't known how to bring it up. Yeah, I do. Do you? Sometimes, but I don't want you to feel pressured. I know you were married before, and I don't want to replace Sarah or make you feel like, Elena, stop. You're not replacing anyone. Sarah was part of my past. You're part of my future. Those are different things. So you'd want to get married? I'd want to marry you, yeah. If you're asking. Elena laughed. I'm not asking. I'm just testing the waters. Consider them tested. They got married 6 months later in a small ceremony in Caleb's parents' backyard. Noah was the ring bearer, and Emma, 18 months old and walking now, was the flower girl, though she mostly just threw the petals at people instead of dropping them on the ground. It wasn't a fancy wedding. Elena wore a simple white dress she'd found on sale, and Caleb wore the same suit he'd worn to his interview at the construction company. But when they stood in front of their small group of family and friends and promised to take care of each other, it felt more real than anything Caleb had experienced in years. I can't believe we're doing this, Elena whispered during the reception. Having second thoughts? Not even a little. I just keep thinking about that night I showed up at your door. I was so desperate and scared, and I had no idea you were going to change my entire life. You changed mine too, for better or worse. Definitely better. They danced badly to a song Noah picked out, and Emma fell asleep in Caleb's mother's arms, and Caleb looked around at the people who'd become his family and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Complete. Life settled into a new rhythm after that. Caleb went to work, came home to chaos, helped with dinner and homework and bedtime routines. Elena went back to her job part-time, working from home when she could, and relying on Caleb's mother for childcare when she couldn't. Noah started 3rd grade and joined the soccer team. Emma learned to talk, then wouldn't shut up, chattering constantly about everything and nothing. They weren't perfect. They fought about stupid things like whose turn it was to do dishes and whether Noah was old enough for a cell phone. Emma went through a phase where she only wanted Caleb, screaming whenever Elena tried to put her to bed, which hurt Elena's feelings even though Caleb assured her it was just a phase. Noah sometimes got jealous of the attention Emma received and acted out in ways that reminded Caleb the kid was still processing his mother's death. But they worked through it, together. When Emma was 3, Elena got pregnant again. It wasn't planned. They'd been careful, but apparently not careful enough, and the news sent both of them into a brief panic. "We can barely handle 2 kids, Elena said, staring at the positive pregnancy test. "I know. How are we going to manage 3? "I have no idea." But then Emma toddled into the bathroom, saw her mother's face, and asked, "Why are you crying, Mama?" Elena picked her up, holding her close. "Because there's going to be another baby." "A baby like me?" "Yeah, sweetheart, like you." Emma's face lit up. "I'm going to be a big sister?" "You are." "Like Noah?" "Just like Noah." And just like that, the panic faded into something that felt like excitement. Their second daughter, Lily, was born on a snowy February morning. Noah was 11 now, old enough to wait in the hospital waiting room with Caleb's parents, while Caleb stayed with Elena through the delivery. Emma stayed with them too, more interested in the vending machines than in what was happening down the hall. Lily came faster than Emma had, only 6 hours of labor, and when the doctor placed her on Elena's chest, Caleb felt that same overwhelming rush of love and terror he'd felt with both Noah and Emma. "We're getting good at this," Elena said, exhausted but smiling. "Don't even think about a 4th. "Deal." They brought Lily home to a house that was already too small and too loud, and somehow made it work. Noah helped with the baby when he wasn't buried in homework or soccer practice. Emma was convinced Lily was her personal baby doll and wanted to help with everything, which was both adorable and exhausting. Caleb's life had become the kind of chaos he never could have imagined that night Elena knocked on his door. But it was good chaos, the kind that came from being needed, from being part of something bigger than yourself. One evening when Lily was about 6 months old, Caleb found himself standing in the doorway of the nursery, watching Elena rock the baby to sleep while singing softly. Emma was already asleep in her room, and Noah was at the kitchen table working on a project for school. This was his life now. 3 kids, a wife he loved more every day, a house that was always messy and never quiet. It was nothing like what he'd imagined when he was younger. Nothing like the neat, controlled existence he'd tried to build after Sarah died. It was so much better. Elena looked up and caught him watching. "What are you thinking about?" "Just how lucky I am." "We're both lucky." "Yeah, but I got the better end of the deal." "How do you figure?" "Because I got you and Aunt Emma and Lily. And I got to watch Noah become an amazing kid, all because you were brave enough to ask me for something impossible." Elena stood up, Lily finally asleep in her arms, and crossed the room to kiss him. It wasn't impossible. It just felt that way. They put Lily in her crib and went downstairs to find Noah still working, his tongue sticking out in concentration the way it always did when he was focused. "How's it going, buddy?" Caleb asked. "Good. I'm almost done. It's a project about family." "What did you write?" Noah held up his paper, and Caleb read the title, "My Unconventional Family." "We had to write about what makes our family special," Noah explained. "So I wrote about how we're not like other families, but that's what makes us good." Caleb's throat went tight. "Can I read it?" "It's not finished yet." "That's okay." Noah handed over the paper, and Caleb read about how his family started with loss but grew into something new. About how his dad helped his neighbor have a baby and ended up falling in love. About how his little sisters might not share all the same parents as him, but It didn't matter because family wasn't about biology. It was about who showed up. This is really good, Noah. Thanks. Is it weird that our family is weird? No, I think all the best families are a little weird. Good. Because I like ours. Me too, buddy, me too. Years passed in the way they always do when you're not paying attention. Noah went to middle school, then high school. Emma started kindergarten, then first grade. Lily learned to walk and talk and get into everything her sisters had gotten into before her. Caleb's hair started going gray at the temples, and Elena developed laugh lines that Caleb loved to trace with his fingers. Their house remained too small and too loud, but they'd given up on the idea of moving somewhere bigger. This house had history now. It was where Emma took her first steps, where Lily said her first word, where Noah had learned to ride a bike in the driveway. It was where Caleb had learned that life could surprise you in the best possible ways. On what would have been Sarah's 45th birthday, Caleb took Noah to visit her grave. It was something they did once a year, just the two of them. A chance to remember and talk about the woman who'd given Noah life. Do you think Mom would have liked Elena? Noah asked. He was 16 now, taller than Caleb, with his mother's eyes and his father's stubborn streak. I think she would have loved her. Your mom always wanted me to be happy. Are you? Happy, I mean. Caleb thought about the question. Not just happy, he realized, but fulfilled, complete in a way he'd never expected to be after Sarah died. Yeah, buddy, I really am. Good, because Elena's the best thing that happened to us. Her and the girls. When did you get so wise? I've always been wise. You just weren't paying attention. Caleb laughed and pulled his son into a hug, thinking about how much had changed since that rainy night 8 years ago. How one desperate request had led to 2 daughters, a marriage, and a life he couldn't have imagined in his darkest moments of grief. That evening, the whole family gathered for dinner, something they tried to do every night despite conflicting schedules and general chaos. Emma told a long, winding story about something that happened at school. Lily spilled her milk and cried about it. Noah tried to sneak extra dessert when he thought no one was looking. It was ordinary, messy, perfect. After the kids were in bed, Caleb and Elena sat on their back porch, the same place they'd had so many important conversations over the years. Do you ever think about that first night? Elena asked. When I showed up at your door? All the time. Do you regret it? Any of it? Caleb pulled her closer. Not for a second. You gave me my life back, Elena. I was just existing before you, going through the motions. You made me live again. You did the same for me. I was so lost, and you gave me everything I'd ever wanted. Not just the baby, but a family, a partner, a home. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars come out, 2 people who'd taken an enormous risk and had it pay off in ways neither of them could have predicted. What do you think happens next? Elena asked. What do you mean? I mean, we've had 8 years of chaos. Kids growing up, careers, all of it. What's the next chapter? Caleb thought about it. More the same, probably. Noah's going to college in a couple years. The girls are going to keep growing. We're going to get older and more tired and probably more gray. That sounds exhausting. It does, doesn't it? Elena laughed. I can't wait. And that, Caleb thought, was the whole thing right there. Life wasn't about avoiding the hard parts or waiting for everything to be perfect. It was about finding someone who made the chaos worthwhile. Someone who looked at the exhausting future and said they couldn't wait to face it together. He'd learned that the hard way, through loss and grief and a desperate woman knocking on his door in the rain. But he'd learned it. Family wasn't what you started with. It was what you built. Sometimes it looked traditional, and sometimes it looked like a single father helping his neighbor have a baby and falling in love in the process. Sometimes it was messy and unconventional and required more courage than you thought you had. But when it worked, when you found people who showed up for you, who chose you every single day, it was worth every terrifying moment of vulnerability it took to get there. Caleb had been given a second chance at family, and he wasn't going to waste it being afraid of what might go wrong. He was going to embrace every chaotic, beautiful, imperfect moment of it, because that's what family was. Not the absence of problems, but the presence of people who loved you anyway. As they headed inside for the night, Caleb took one last look at the house next door. Elena's old place, now rented to a young couple with a baby on the way. He wondered if they'd find their own version of happiness, their own unconventional path to family. He hoped they would. Everyone deserved that kind of second chance, that kind of impossible possibility. Caleb turned off the porch light and followed Elena inside, closing the door on the past and stepping fully into the future they'd built together, one brave choice at a time.